Welcome everybody to the fourth Meet the Sponsors webinar. Today we have a special guest, Peter Calhoun. I've known Peter for at least a decade. He's with BFGoodrich Racing and Michelin Motorsports, which, by the way, I'll let Pete get into it. Michelin was recently ranked as the #1 tire company in the world.
Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Alex. It's great to be with you this evening and everyone. And again, apologize for the technical difficulties. Welcome to the 21st century when there's spring storms happening in the southeast. But yeah, as Alex mentioned, Michelin is the #1 tire company in the world in the most recent rankings that came out in the fall. Traditionally, it's been between Group Michelin, of which BFGoodrich is an important part, and another manufacturer that are sort of one and two, and they really are the two most dominant tire manufacturers in the world. But we are proud of that accomplishment. But we're much more diversified than just tires. Also, we consider ourselves a mobility company. Many people will be familiar with Michelin maps and guides and the restaurant rankings. There were recently, even during the pandemic that's going on now, we announced some Michelin stars for Chicago recently and San Diego area, which some of you are from. But we are a mobility company, and tires is obviously the preeminent, most visible product of ours, but we do a lot more than just tires.
Nice, nice. Well, not only just tires, but you're also in many different motorsports.
Yeah, I mean, we really do have diversification in our motorsport properties too, because not only do we race with the Michelin brand of the mothership, but we also have the full motorsport properties. We compete in everything from the World Endurance Championship with the preeminent event being Le Mans. We're the official tire of MotoGP for our two-wheel fans. We race in Dakar, we race in Baja, and everything in between. In the U.S., IMSA, the International Motorsports Association, we've been the official tire of IMSA for the past 3 years. And this year, we're partners with Mazda, and MX-5 Cup has moved under the IMSA sanction also. So when we go to Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course next week, we will have both brands on track in Lexington, Ohio.
How many different racers or teams or properties would you say Michelin and BFGoodrich are involved with?
Well, they're all unique, and all the properties are unique also. So when you look at our corporate properties that are most visible on a global scale, some of those I just mentioned, in addition to Formula E, the electric Formula car series. In those series, we're the control tire, the spec tire, and everybody will race on a similar tire solution. When we go to Baja, it's much different because it's still an open tire competition. We are still racing head-to-head against our competitors, not just on the track or in the dirt, but they're the competitors we go against at the dealer sales counter. When you walk into your local tire store, your local retailer, and you want to shop for tires, we use that as a proof point. To demonstrate our performance, our toughness when we go down to Baja, but also the translation of technology, that the tire that we race in Baja, that we'll learn and put that into products that go on your everyday light truck and off-road vehicle.
You had told me that before. You said BFG is in for three. They sponsor for 3 reasons. One's brand awareness, one is research and development, and obviously sales.
I have lost you again, Alex.
That's interesting. Can others on the call hear me at this point, or is it just
Yes,
Pete?
I can see you and hear you.
Okay, I know. We could. Tammy says, Pete, you could also call in.
Okay. Okay. I think I should be on now.
You need to mute, I think, one of your other clients.
Okay. Peter's on.
Apologize.
Peter, I can hear you now. That's fine. If others can hear, Peter, can you say something and we'll have the guests wave if they can hear you?
I can hear you, Alex.
Okay, sounds like you're on. Everybody's waving. So let's just do it like this. So we're going to go right back. I'm just going to jump right back into it because I hate wasting time. Obviously, BFGoodrich Michelin are involved in many different motorsports, and there's a lot of different teams that the brands sponsor. When you sponsor a team or even a property, do you typically approach them or do they approach you? How many of your sponsorships are because racers went to you and successfully were able to land the deal versus you seeking them out because you wanted them to represent the brand?
Yeah, that's a good question, Alex, because it happens both ways. And I apologize, I'm getting a little bit of an echo here myself. I probably receive up to 1,000 proposals a year, and most of them are people approaching us. There are situations where we will reach out to somebody that we identify that might be in good alignment with the brand for either communication, race success, or somebody younger that we want to nurture.
So earlier on, before when we were getting ready for the call, we were talking about some of the important things that are necessary when a team approaches BF Goodrich. And what you said was really key, because we haven't talked about this in any other webinars before, but you said it's very important for teams not just to know the company and what your objectives are with products, but to know the trends within the industry. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit? Because I think you really hit a very good talking point there.
Yeah, I think it's important when you reach out to a company to know about them, but about us, the industry that they participate in. A good example was the tire rankings
we just talked about, and that, how did Michelin perform, BF Goodrich perform against their peer set? Educate yourself on where they fit within the competitive set, so you're knowledgeable about the company you are approaching. On the flip side of the coin, prepare yourself when you're presenting a partnership. What is your short-term, your midterm goal? A 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan. So you have steps to build upon. It's just not one and done, and something that's measurable. I will say one of my best learnings in all the years I've been in motorsport and in the marketing roles within motorsport was from an old friend of mine at an OE back in the time, and he says, we want to be partners, not sponsors. Sponsors in the traditional sense, in the old school sense, was very directional. It was, company XYZ provides funding, product to whomever, and 12 months later, you circle back and tell them how many races you won and what you've done, and you had stickers on the car and things. But that method does not work in the 21st century. And the first thing I will tell anybody that I talk to is replace the word sponsorship in your vernacular with partner. Replace it with partnership. It needs to be a win-win for both companies in this day and age. And in companies, in this sense, I'm talking whether it be an athlete or a race team. It needs to be mutual rewarding. Just as a brand awareness exercise, that's not good enough anymore. And I would say the two important things under the partnership are content and commerce. Those are sort of the two big C's to me, content and commerce. And I think both of those have really risen to the forefront in the past 14 months as we've all battled this pandemic, not just domestically, but globally. The partners that were strong with our brands were producing content, pushing content out through their social channels and other means, even when they weren't racing. And that's how they bring value to the brands that they're representing. And if it's just not us, because let's be honest, a race team, we're there as their tire partner, but they have partners for multiple other hard goods and consumables, and then hopefully other non-endemic companies also. But content is king right now.
So when a team is trying to create content that is useful and valuable to BF Goodrich or Michelin, what is it you're looking for? Is it content that will be used on social, content for magazine articles, content for publicity, content for posters, content for TV commercial, or do you want actual TV shows? What content should racers be thinking about creating in order to attract your attention to get a sponsorship from a company like yours?
Yeah, it can be any or all of the above. I think what's important is how can you differentiate yourself as an athlete or as a race team from all the other slew of people that are trying to do the same thing? as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I mean, if I receive 1,000 proposals a year, how are you going to stand out from the crowd? So content is one of the ways to do that. And we've had a couple athlete partners, again, in the last 12, 14 months that pushed out real good quality content. And it was stuff through their individual channels. And I think in the age of digital media, it is important that you have social media channels that are unique to your race program. They're separate from your personal life. As much as we all have our private lives, individual lives, the people that visit you because you race a car, race a truck, race on a motorcycle, a jet ski, it doesn't matter. They want to sort of live vicariously through you. And you need to show some elements that make you seem real and human, and that what they envision is achievable. But there can be too much also. So make sure your athlete channels are separate from your personal channels. But as far as content itself, the one big thing is make sure you have usage rights for the content you provide your partners. The big one is photography nowadays. I feel sorry for friends I have in the industry that are photographers at times, because it is so easy that their intellectual property gets copied and plagiarized, and they never get the return on it to make a living because they have bills to pay and mortgages to pay just like everybody else. But make sure you have usage rights. No, it's not free. Again, that's how they make their living. But photography, video are always important. We do something on the BF Goodrich side. We call it Motorsport Monday. So basically on our social channels on Monday afternoon, we'll do a little recap of our weekend activity and showcase our class winners or events that happened over the past weekend. Yesterday was a good example. The Silver State 300 was outside of Las Vegas this past weekend. So we had a recap yesterday afternoon of our multiple class winners out in the Nevada desert. This coming weekend, we really don't have anything. So other stuff will go out through the brand channels. But the following weekend, we'll be at Mid-Ohio with Mazda MX-5 Cup. There'll be live stream through the IMSA.com and Mazda Motorsports channels. So we'll do a little pre-event teaser for live tune-in alerts. And then on Monday, we'll have a little recap of the weekend activity. But again, content and having usage rights for that content is important.
That's really key, especially for larger corporations that have departments that need to approve every single thing that goes out. You had mentioned earlier when you and I were talking privately that you are now looking for socially responsible content. Could you define what you mean by socially responsible? And then also give an example of a really good content that a racer gave you recently, whether it's socially responsible or just fits into the business plan.
Well, and I think Alex, you bring up a valid point. We're in a constantly changing media landscape, and sports marketing landscape, and I don't think we're through it yet. It was starting to happen before the pandemic. I think the pandemic's accelerated it a little bit as far as the changes we're going to see in sports marketing. Like I alluded earlier, it's just not about eyeballs anymore because there's cheaper ways to just get visibility for your brand, for brand awareness. But as far as social responsibility, as a large global corporation, we would not only want to be socially responsible, respectful to our employees, our neighbors, our customers, but also to the environment. So you're going to hear sort of a buzzword right now, sustainability. So sustainability, it's one of those words. It means different things to different people. I think if you ask a racer, it's like, how am I going to be racing next week, next year, and 5 years? But in the corporate context, sustainability is really more protection of the earth and making sure that we leave the desert when we're going off-road racing. We leave it in the same or better condition than when we left. So it's things as simple as trash pickup programs when we're in Nevada and Arizona and California. It's that people are using fuel mats when they're doing pit stops, so spilt fuel isn't going into the soil. But it's corporate responsibility and sustainability really tie together. There are definitely some examples. I think as Americans, we sort of take our freedom seriously, and we lag a little bit behind in some of those initiatives to some other zones in the world, but it's quickly changing on that. So if you look on the West Coast, there's organizations like Tread Lightly or the Blue Ribbon Coalition that do trail protection. So it's just not motorsports, but it's recreational off-roading. And obviously with the just growing explosion of UTVs and side-by-sides, that you get a lot of novice users of those, and they're out having fun with their families and friends and everything, but they need to learn trail etiquette for driving, but also picking up after themselves. And that's where companies like ourselves, that's really becoming to the forefront.
So I know that being socially responsible and cleaning up after a race is important. I recall, might have been 7-8 years ago, you had some top executives from Michelin. They flew in from France and they were at one of the races. I remember it was a Las Vegas race. I'll never forget, because you had me driving them around and we picking up the tire treads, the scraps and the shrapnel that was on the track. And I was really impressed, like, wow, these guys are cleaning up. And then one of the execs looks over and goes, yeah, we want to do a little R&D and see why the tires exploded. Not just ours, but our competitors. So it's more than that. You're also doing research and development to see how to make tires better, I presume. That's one of the reasons that you sponsor teams.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at motorsports, it's sort of the three-legged stool. You have R&D, you have marketing and brand awareness, and then the third one's commerce, which I mentioned. And at a very high level, those are three. But R&D is at the pinnacle of why Group Michelin for both our brands goes racing. You mentioned the example of going up and picking up tread, whether it would have been at a short course race when we first met. One of our guests on the phone tonight would be very familiar when we go sports car racing. If a tire ever comes apart, which is a rarity in our world, we go up and pick up all the shrapnel from the tires. They go back in body bags, literally to our lab, so they can be analyzed as to why they failed, why we can improve, and if, when possible, we'll do it with our competitors' tires also. We are a very technically driven company, engineering driven company as a whole. So that is an important part to get our learnings out of motorsport. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, what we learn in motorsport does get that trickle down effect into our consumer offers. If we look at the BF Goodrich light truck rec portfolio, what people would know as our all-terrain KO2 or our mud-terrain KM3, those have direct learnings from motorsport. From what we've done in Baja, from what we've done in short course racing, out in the Lucas series when Alex and I first met years ago. And then if you look at our Michelin UHP portfolio, ultra high performance portfolio, what we learn when we go to Le Mans, endurance sports car racing, those things absolutely trickle down into our consumer offer for tires you can buy for your sports cars and things like that. Nowadays, we're seeing it with what we do in MotoGP for motorcycle tires. Obviously, what we do in Dakar affects both cars and bikes. And then Formula E is something really unique right now in that we actually race on a treaded tire in Formula E. So if people look at it from the outside, it very much has an appearance of a passenger car ultra high performance tire that you'd see in a Corvette, Mustang, Porsche. But again, those learnings from competition, they absolutely trickle down, because there's things you can learn in motorsport that would take years in a controlled laboratory environment. It's just such a dynamic learning process.
So the three tiers are the three things you're looking for from a team: brand awareness, research and development, and commerce, obviously sales. How much of the commerce is direct to consumer versus B2B? Is B2B a very big part of what you're looking for from sponsoring teams?
Yeah, so commerce can lean one of those two directions. It could be, as we refer to it even internally in our structure, B2C, business to consumer, or it could be B2B, business to business. If you look at the top echelons of motorsport globally right now, a lot of those programs are based on B2B. As I mentioned earlier, there's cheaper ways to get eyeballs, and just being brutally honest, if that's all you want to do is get brand awareness. There's a time, there's a place. You'll see it with upstart companies where they're looking to get brand awareness and something fast, action-packed. Sometimes they have a product that has direct bearing on that. If they're in the automotive aftermarket, like truck wreck market, they'll have a product that can be used there. But if they're a general consumer goods company, non-endemic, there's obviously other ways to get eyeballs, unless you have an executive, an owner that just loves motorsport and wants to support it. The flip side of that is B2B deals, where businesses are using it to get shelf space at a retailer. They're using it to get placements somewhere. I think one of the best examples, and it really started to take off in the early 90s, was the big box retailers. And I sort of generically refer to it as the Kmart model, because it sort of started in IndyCar with Newman Haas and Kmart. But Lowe's, Home Depot, Target, Menards have all followed a similar exercise, where they may be the primary partner on the car, on the bike, whatever discipline it is. But those other names you're seeing on the car, a lot of those, most of them are their vendors at the store. So they're investing into those programs to get shelf space at the store, and premium shelf space. So a lot of those work that way.
Those are typically pass-through rights. So when you do a sponsorship or a deal with a property or a team, you're also getting authority to pass through the right of that sponsorship to one of your partners in case you want to use their logo and visibility for an event instead of your own. Do you do a lot of those with some of your retailers?
Currently, we are not. Yeah, currently we are not. Though we have in the past. There's not a set model for each of them, so they also have their unique intricacies to them. What we have been in recent history to work on, especially in the off-road community, where it's more grassroots and there's a lot of family-owned teams, private-owned teams, is obviously what started out as a hobby has become a semi-professional or professional activity in many cases. But the family, the individual, has some business that is supporting it at the end, and they want to try to offset some of those expenses. But if their day-to-day business has a fleet of vehicles, guess what? Fleets of vehicles need tires. So we've had good success working with our colleagues internally at Michelin, building out programs. Let's say we can build a relationship with XYZ business. They have a fleet of however many vehicles, and then using that to build out a sponsorship program, but it's based on sales. And what happens, it's sort of like a rebate program, essentially. We'll help support your race program by you using our tires on your fleet of vehicles. And it becomes a win-win for everybody, because the guy's getting a better deal on tires he buys for his fleet, and then he's getting some support for his racing program. And then you build advocacy from both sides. So, but yeah, those programs are all a little unique.
Is that how most of your sponsorships are structured, or is that what most of the BFG Michelin sponsorships look like? Or what typically is an average sponsorship? I'm guessing at this point that it's primarily tires, not dollars. Might be a mix in some cases, but I'm gonna just from what my experience go out on the limb and say I would bet most of your sponsorships are product sponsorships. Am I right?
Yeah. Product absolutely is number one in our world. Obviously, we have a consumable. Every racer needs tires, depending on the discipline they're competing in. They need multiple sets a weekend to a couple sets a season, depending on what they're doing. It can work out a few different ways. It could be a complementary product. It can be discounted product. It can be product contingent on your results. You win, you get X amount of product. Again, they can be structured many ways, but in the tire world, it's most often product related, and I would say that's true. Again, in the off-road arena where it's open competition and things aren't spec, whether it be a damper company, a lighting company, a wheel company, product sponsorships are going to be most common. And that is a good point, Alex, that often, when we get a deck from somebody to review, and you know what you're asking for when you approach somebody for a partnership. Are you looking for money? Are you looking for product? Are you looking for discounted product? Be clear with what your expectation is for an investment from the partner, but be equally clear on what you're going to deliver. Because too often you tell us all about your resume and what you've done, but there was never an ask, and there was never a here's what I'm going to do for you again. In that it needs to be mutually beneficial for both parties.
You got to ask for the order, as they say. Ask for the order. So on the incentive sponsorships, how much is the weighting towards incentivizing, such as, if you get first, second, third, you get more, versus just standard amount in a contract? Are most of yours incentive based? And the reason I ask is, I remember when I first met Todd Steen, years before, I know it's probably in 2005 or 2006, before you got involved with Michelin at that levels. Todd told me once that he makes all of his racers on the podium say, or at the time they did, hey, thanks, BFGoodrich, my tires really hooked up this race. And that was an incentive to give them either more product or more cash. And without them saying that, it would reduce how much they got. Is that typical with tire companies? Is that what a lot of racers get? Or was that just his way of doing things?
It was a little bit of Todd, the way he did things. And I've known Todd for years also. And there are other companies in the industry that help mentor their athletes that way. Obviously, the big one for all the companies nowadays is the hat dance on the podium. Everybody wants their hat up there on the podium. When you look at global properties, tire companies, for the most part, are sort of the first one on the heads. But as energy drink companies have strengthened their position, especially in open competitions, and with helmet deals and head deals, the energy drink companies have started to flex their muscle a little bit in that category. But everybody wants that podium shot with the hats on their heads. Contingency programs, the other real common one is, this isn't even sponsored athletes necessarily, but customers of yours. If they're competing in series, you finish first, second, third place, depending on the number of entries in a given class, then product will be awarded. That's very common in grassroots road racing, autocrossing, drag racing, where they're very grassroots oriented activities and properties, where people are doing it for a hobby. They go autocrossing or club road racing as opposed to going to the golf course on the weekend. And they're customers, and you reward them for their success to build their loyalty and advocacy over time. So product contingencies are very common in those type of domains.
So Pete, we've not prepped for this, so apologize if I'm catching you off guard here, but how has COVID and how has this last year changed the way you marketed through teams at events? Clearly, there weren't as many events. Did you notice make any major revelations this last year from COVID? Is anything that you learned about what you need to do different?
Yeah, it's interesting, and we're still learning. I mean, as we all know, we're not out of this yet. Things have improved. We're slowly getting back to some level of normalcy. But I vividly remember we were at the Mint 400 in Vegas the first weekend in March last year, and 4 days later we were pretty much closing down. It had been told work from home tomorrow, and work from home tomorrow became months and months. So the last weekend of June, we were basically dark for events, and it didn't matter if it was on pavement or in the dirt. We were basically dark until the last week of June last summer. And at that time, myself and one of my engineers hopped on a plane and went to Las Vegas for the first Best in the Desert race, the postponed Silver State 300, which ironically was just this past weekend. And, we had that surreal experience of landing in an empty, dark Las Vegas and driving down Las Vegas Boulevard, and the only thing slowing you down was the cycle to stoplights. But starting up, right after that, from July 1 through Thanksgiving, we really got on a cadence with all the different properties we were engaged with, of events every 2 weeks or so. It was remarkable. And I think when you look at motorsport globally, they've rebounded quicker than some other sports. Obviously, there's been restrictions that we've had to adhere to, and we still have to adhere to for safety and health protocols. Internally at Michelin, getting back to what I mentioned earlier, is about our responsibility to us as employees, our families, our neighbors. I still have to get security approvals for travel and things where we're going, especially international travel, even going to Mexico. But at the same time, I think it gave everybody time to reflect. People had more free time with their families, maybe not as much with their friends, at least face to face as they would have liked. So one thing I noticed come fall was people were more prepared than they have been in other years. And I think it's something that people should remember as they're putting together partnership proposals and decks to be reviewed on timing. A good example, so Pikes Peak's an annual event in Colorado Springs. Traditionally, it's the last weekend of June. Last year, because of COVID, it was delayed to the last week of August. So it was delayed about 60 days or so. I had more proposals come across my desk for Pikes Peak before Christmas than usually I will receive by the end of March. And that's one example, but I experienced that with a lot of different properties where people were getting proposals in earlier, and they may have been a little bit more complete, a little bit more comprehensive than they had been historically, just because they had more time to think about it and build out a business plan. And
that's interesting. So proposals are getting better. Hear that, guys? Competition's getting.
Yeah, so it's interesting because people had the time for something that they really should have been doing from day one. And Alex, you and I talked about this in the last few weeks. I mean, timing's important. When we talk about learning about the company you want to pitch for an idea, one of the important things is know what is their fiscal year. We're on a traditional calendar year with Group Michelin, but if you're ever pitching a Japanese company, it's not uncommon that Japanese companies' fiscal starts on April 1. Sometimes a lot of them are a quarter off on when they're planning their fiscal year. So the cycle's a little bit different when they're doing their financial planning and their marketing planning. Exactly. So from our perspective, January 1 calendar year makes it simple, but as just noted, fourth quarter can be very busy because you have events wrapping up, season and events wrapping up. You're also wrapping up your business year, while at the same time planning your next year. For timing to get proposals on people's desks, if you're able to get something out there, an initial teaser, initial introduction, September. Get it out there in September before the end of the third quarter, because by the time people get in October and November, they're really getting into the nuts and the bolts of their activations and executions and how they're going to spend their budget or presenting their budget to their management team. If you present a program in February for a race season that's going to start in March or April, you're too late. Too late for him.
European or international events and properties versus domestic American? Because you're right, a lot of foreigners are on a different fiscal calendar in a lot of foreign countries. You know, in Australia, it's winter when it's summer here. How does that come into play? Are sponsorships the same overseas as they are in the United States, or do you take into account factors?
So the differences that I've experienced with our brands are more around event calendars than Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere. For example, you mentioned Australia. BFG is quite active in Australia. You know, I will joke with some of my colleagues internally, and some of them in Australia, often they think of themselves sort of as the 51st state. They're very American in their thinking. They're very California, laid back in a lot of their attitudes. But Australia's biggest off-road event of the calendar is in mid-June. It's usually a week after the Baja 500. And it's called the Fink. And it's out in the middle of nowhere in Australia, desert race. But their biggest event is in June, and their sports car season's happening now over there. So Australian supercars and Carrera Cup and everything, those events are starting to happen now. So they're not off that much. Europe, obviously, they start a little bit later than the States as far as calendar of events, just because of weather, except for rally. And stage rally, I'm talking about this because Monte Carlo is usually their season opener, and it's usually late January. And then obviously from a global perspective, Dakar. I know Dakar has moved to Saudi Arabia the past 2 years. That event starts usually January 3rd or 4th. So scrutineering and everything is happening between Christmas and New Year's, and equipment's moving early December when it gets on ships in Marseille to go across the Mediterranean to get to Saudi. So the Americans that have been competing in Dakar, like the Polaris factory team that went this year, some of the drivers, you know, they really need to plan ahead because your holidays are going to be taken up with travel and testing.
Right. Now I'm being signaled that we have several questions that have come through. I don't know what they are, but I'll let Tammy read the first couple off.
Okay. Sorry.
Can you guys hear Tammy? I don't know if her mic is on. Yes.
I heard her.
Okay, hold on. I need to scroll here. Okay. Are you more likely to partner with a team versus an individual athlete?
So that is a good question that that's sort of zone specific to. In America, we partner with a lot of athletes, individual athletes, depending on the series and the discipline. Off-road, very common. Club race activities, it would be more common to, you know, more grassroots activities. In Europe, or at the top echelon of sports car racing or, you know, stock car racing, most of those agreements are going to be with teams or series. It's important to recognize that often the agreement is with the property, not the team. A good example, I mean, let's just go to the top of motorsport in America, NASCAR. You know, the largest American tire company has been aligned with NASCAR for decades now, and that is, you know, how it's been. All the teams buy from the same tire manufacturer. You know, there's now real special deals going around. Everybody pays the same price for the same product. So yes, there are athlete deals out there, but it really is when and where and what you are racing.
A lot of those would be personal services agreement. When a brand just sponsors an individual, sometimes they'll have a personal services agreement, which extends far beyond the racing. When you're out having coffee, when you're at a restaurant, you're wearing our logo, when you go out in public, anywhere in public. More retired athletes tend to do that, the personal services agreements with the actual team agreements. I guess a team agreement, you're sponsoring the owner of the team, who, regardless of who the drivers are, the owner will select those drivers. Whereas with the individual personal services agreement, you're sponsoring an individual and a person.
Yeah, and there's exceptions to that, as noted. Personal service agreement. Take somebody like Mario Andretti. Everybody knows who Mario Andretti is, but he has a personal services agreement with Firestone for promotion of IndyCar racing. You go to an IndyCar racing, and you can ride around with Mario in the two-seater IndyCar for their VIP guests and everything. But he's an icon within the sport, not just domestically, but globally. So that's a good example. In NASCAR, somebody like Dale Earnhardt Jr. would have something like that often. Also, Michelin has used retired athletes in the past as brand ambassadors and influencers. Right? When we re-entered MotoGP in 2016, American Colin Edwards was an ambassador for us. So he was doing some test riding for us, but then he was a spokesperson and host when we'd go to events for dealers and consumers. We have used some other athletes on occasion at Le Mans and in World Endurance Championship that are no longer active. Somebody like an Alan McNish, who's actually an Audi ambassador. We've used him at various events. But again, I think it emphasizes that all the situations are different. Getting back to athlete partnerships, and these actually aren't BFG partnerships, but when you look at highly visible athletes in America, sort of in the motorsport realm, Travis Pastrana and Ken Block are two people that people really gravitate to because of their audience and the size of their audience. But a lot of it is not what they've done on the racetrack, but what they've done. So something we talked about earlier is content. Because they've made these high energy videos and other things that they get a lot of eyeballs and visibility, which is one of the sort of three legs of the stool. But they've done a lot more than just that to build their individual brands.
Right. All right.
Okay, another question? All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
What about, so this is coming from a small team. It says they really need cash sponsorships more than anything else. So what would capture your attention on a partnership deck if, being blunt, who need money to keep us racing?
So that's a challenging
approach.
Yeah.
That might be the better question.
Yeah, so that's a challenging question, not knowing a little bit more on the unique circumstances. What are they racing? Where are they racing? If you're a small team racing in NASCAR, much different if you're a small team racing, a UTV. Are you looking for hundreds of thousands of dollars, or are you looking for $5,000? But I think, again, the tire companies, and I'm using that as a collective halo, are in a little bit different situation because it is a consumable. And people need them every weekend. So what is the value if you get X number of tires that would have cost you this amount at retail, but you're getting them no charge or a discount, whatever. I like to ensure that our racers have an adequate supply of fresh tires and rubber to highlight their performance on track before you start writing checks. Writing checks, it's not easy because everybody is constrained with money, but product is the first thing of real value to a race team.
So real out of curiosity, then, are there any $5,000 small sponsorships?
On occasion. I mean, again, it depends
Unlikely.
on what they're doing and what their program is, but product is much more common.
Okay. All right.
Okay, how about this one? I'm a grassroots drifter. I don't see any Michelin presence in it. Is that something they're looking into?
So, ironically, and not knowing what level you're drifting in, we were in FD, Formula Drift, up through the end of last season. One of our acquisitions in the last 2.5, 3 years that put us over the top to the #1 ranking within the tire manufacturers was a company called Multistrada out of Southeast Asia. Multistrada, you would know better by their retail name, Achilles. So we were in FD with Achilles through the end of last year. Currently, drifting is not on our radar. It would not be for Michelin. BFG, we've looked at it, and we're in it much heavier about 12 years or so ago. One of the things with drifting demographically, it can be very attractive for a brand. It's a younger group, tend to be educated, have some disposable income on things. From a tire company's perspective, when you're competing in tier 1, tier 2 level products with the top brands in the world, it doesn't necessarily showcase the product attributes that we want our product to be known for. So when we're selling ultra high performance tires, we're thinking grip, wear, longevity on things. And the drift arena, unfortunately, it's become dominated by how we categorize things, tier 3 and below brands. So you see a lot of these smaller brands from Southeast Asia. None of the American companies are there right now. So it's not really something on our radar right now. It's specific to drifting.
Okay, that's a good question. Tammy, is there-
Yeah. Okay, another either or question. Are you more likely to partner with a live race series versus media presentations of a series, or none of the above?
Can you repeat that, Tammy?
What's a media presentation of a series? I'm not sure I
That was
understood that either.
from Ron, if he wants to, but it says either or question. Are you more likely to partner with a live race series versus media presentations of a series?
Why don't we let Rob-
Probably should have phrased that a little differently. I probably should have said, or both, because that might be the better answer. I don't know. I'll wait for your response.
Okay, so that's an interesting perspective, and I will say it's one of those things, it could be either. There are events, I would say it's more events than properties, where we have invested because of the content and the promotion that comes out of them. However, there are exceptions. Global Rallycross, which is no longer around, but in 2016 and 2017, we were partnered with GRC Global Rallycross with Red Bull as the title partner. That was something absolutely we looked at because it had demographics similar to drifting, ironically, in that they were young and affluent. But they had a very strong media package. Global Rallycross at the time had all events live on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, either on NBC or NBC Sports. They had the juggernaut of Red Bull and Red Bull Media House behind them. So that was an example of something where it was competition, but there was also a media component that was highly valued behind that to an attractive demographic. Then there's properties you will invest in because there's a commercial opportunity there. You can sell tires. I mean, at the end of the day, we are a multifaceted global corporation. As I said at the very beginning, you know, we're a mobility company. We like to consider ourselves. But if we go into a series and we know we can sell X number of tires over a given year, well, at the end of the day, selling tires is what gets our paychecks every other week. You know, Mazda MX-5 Cup under my responsibility is a good example. We've been averaging 26, 27 cars a weekend through the first 3 events of the season. All the events are in collaboration in support of either IMSA or IndyCar. Our event last weekend was with IndyCar at St. Pete. We'll be at Mid-Ohio with IMSA, as mentioned earlier, next weekend. But with 26, 27 cars a weekend, I know we can go there and, you know, sell hundreds of tires on a given weekend to the field. So that's where that commercial part comes in. So to get to the root of your question, I mean, that's one of those questions that when we review a proposal, we'll look at both of that. What's the return here? Is it actual sales or is it, advertising, communication?
From my experience, and most grassroots racers race in series that are not televised, so they probably have to create their own media. Let's assume that two racers approach you, one's in a televised series, one's in a non-televised series. What can the one in the non-televised series do to attract your attention as much as the one in the televised series? Because obviously TV usually will get the money, but if someone doesn't have that advantage because they're not in a televised series, are there other things they can do to make up for that value?
Yeah. There's where that word content comes into play again. I am a firm believer of quality over quantity. So if you have an engaged audience that is following you, and you have good quality content, that will far outweigh the guy that isn't doing anything but his car's on TV. TV is not the powerhouse that it was 10, 15 years ago, and that trend's going to continue. You're seeing more and more properties that are live streamed. Look at the younger generation, look at the teens, 20s, and how many of them are just watching their phone, or their tablet. They may have a 52-inch TV in their living room or somewhere, but they're curating content and watching content on their mobile devices. So TV isn't the big thing that it used to be.
This one was kind of interesting, I thought. It says, how do your marketing partnerships typically begin? In other words, how or where have your past relationships started?
That is a good one. I like that. I like to know too.
Yeah, so that is something that's changing a little bit, and it sort of goes back to my last answer. In the old days, and this is still probably the most important component, a lot of it was face to face. You meet somebody in an event, you meet somebody at a race, a trade show, a mutual acquaintance, and you just start some dialogue. We all know it's a small industry, and introductions happen really quickly. But one thing that's really changed as influencer marketing has become sort of a buzz phrase in the last 5-6 years. Our digital and social teams will come to us sometimes because people will be posting on Instagram or Facebook and tagging us. And our digital and social teams follow all these analytics, and they'll see that Joe Smith tagged us this many times. Do we do anything with them? And then they'll start to follow them a little bit more. So sometimes we'll learn about these people just through our social channels because they're a fan of the brand and using the product. The second part of that, I would say, and this is sort of building out your business plan and how to do those introductions. I mentioned sort of September is a good timeline to reach out to the companies. Don't have your initial reach to a prospective partner via social media or via text if you happen to know the person's phone number. Call them or send them a formal, business structured email for that initial introduction. I also would not send your full deck in that initial introduction. I would make it more casual of an introduction on who you are and what you're doing. And then, at least I can tell you from my team, we reply to every inquiry, then follow it up with a deck where you're very clear, as mentioned, on what the ask is and what the deliverables are. So it's mutually beneficial. But to do the ask through social media is not the way to go about it. You'd be surprised how many we get a week. And not just from motorsports, but from other enthusiasts and stuff. Hey, can I get a set of free tires? Yeah, not the best way to go about it. But to your point, I mean, if you're at an event and you have a partner, a brand that you're using, that you're aligned with, you find that you have similar beliefs and interests, do the introduction. I mean, first off, is getting a name and a face together. I think the other important part of that to remember when companies are doing their planning, especially in large corporations like ourselves that are very structured and have a global reach, we get a lot more inquiries than we're able to support. But to add something, something else has to drop. You know, just because something is the greatest thing since sliced bread, the budget doesn't automatically grow the next year because you want to do it. So there's a give and a take in planning. And that's why, as I said earlier, have a plan. Here's what I want to do in year 1, year 3, year 5. At the end of each of those years, come back with a proof of performance presentation and say, here's what I did the last 12 months. You know, I grew my audience this much on my social channels. They were this engaged. You know, if there's a commerce element, you know, this is how many units we sold or how many dollars we sold. There's a lot of excellent tools out there right now, whether they be in print, in books, online. You know, there's some online resources like Hookit. If you're not familiar with Hookit, they're down outside San Diego, and they do athlete and property valuation for digital platforms. So basically Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Think of it sort of what Joyce Julius does for television in the day. And what I would always tell those guys, I don't care what dollar value you put on it. What I want to know is year to year trend. I want to see that their audience grew and the engagement grew. You can tell me that the value of their post is X number of millions of dollars. It's a fake number. It goes into an algorithm with some value to it. But I want to know number of people and how engaged they were. And lastly, because I know we're running out of time, Alex, despite our technical difficulties, is over deliver. You know, you're going to have in your deck what your ask is and what you're going to deliver. But if you can deliver above and beyond, you're going to make friends and they're going to pick up the phone when you call, because I've got a couple examples of that. If this person calls me, I'm going to pick up because I know they've done everything and more than what they've promised to me. And then it becomes a trusting relationship.
Nice.
And again, a win-win for both parties.
Mike DeFord from Titan Fuel Tank said the same thing. Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
It's true in all sponsorships, really. Well, so Pete, you're very busy, and you've been more busy than the average marketing director who I know, especially during COVID. What's next? Where are you up to next? What's your schedule look like? Next couple of weeks? Or...
Well, it's sort of funny. We've been starting off, as mentioned, we're getting back to some level of normalcy and some level of normal cadence on events. So I'm off to Mid-Ohio next Thursday for IMSA MX5 Cup. And then a few weeks after that, we've got the Baja 500 down in Ensenada, Mexico. A couple members of my team actually went down last night to do some pre-event preparations.
Are you going to swing by
on the BFG side, and then obviously Michelin will be at Mid-Ohio with the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship next week, and they're in Detroit in early June. Our showcase event for the brand, the 24-hour Le Mans, has been postponed from June till later in the summer, and then you know, sort of the halo event for BFG will be the Baja 1000, which will be the weekend before Thanksgiving in November, and fingers crossed everything will be good with COVID around the globe and these events can happen. But it's an exciting time. You know, I think you know, business is for many sectors is returning stronger, quicker than people expected. But at the same time, there are challenges in the transportation sector. I think many of you have seen in the news there's a microchip shortage right now. Coming out of Asia, which are so prevalent in newer vehicles. Logistics is a big issue right now because of online commerce domestically, and even ocean freight is really slowing down right now. But you know, think things are strong right now. So now's the time out to go out and seek out partners for your programs, thinking ahead to 2022.
Well, as we wrap it up right now, would you mind staying on for a couple of minutes and maybe doing some little one-on-one chat with some of the guests? I'm going to switch over to a different camera. I'll close out the webinar officially, and then we can just have a little one-on-one time with whoever is still on the line.
Yeah, I've got a few minutes again.
All right, well, I want to thank everybody for joining. Once again, sorry that we had a few delays. It happens. We're learning every single webinar so far. There's been something, whether my mic didn't work or the camera turned off or some guy butts in and talks for 15 minutes. So there was always something going on. Today, Pete, we learned that we can always just turn off our video if we need to and go straight to audio. So we'll do that. I'm going to close it here, and then I'm going to walk over to my other computer and let's just do a little chat.
Okay, so,
Stay tuned. I got to switch to the other microphone too.
okay.